Now it's time to talk about one of my favorite things, and that is treats. Now, treats obviously are something that can really derail any kind of lifestyle change or any kind of diet or anything like that. But these kind of treats that I'm going to tell you about, actually, generally speaking, they're going to actually not interrupt your fat loss by too much at all. And like I said at the start of this module, I really think knowing that you can have a little treat here and there during the week can actually make all the difference to a lot of people, and myself included. So one of my favorite treats that I do have during the week is a sugar-free chocolate. Now, we've talked about artificial sweeteners, and normally they get used where the words sugar-free are being used. But the sugar-free chocolates that I go for are ones that are made with stevia. Now, you can buy these online. I've been lucky enough to find them in my local grocery store as well. And generally speaking, they tend to be a dark chocolate. And the reason for that is that dark chocolate is naturally higher in fat, and it's naturally higher in cocoa. And that's where the fat comes from a lot of the time. So by producing a dark chocolate, the expectation isn't there for it to be very, very sweet. And so they can use some stevia. And the result generally is a really, really nice tasting chocolate that also has a really good feel in your mouth. Now, I did mention that it's quite high in fat. But with what we know about insulin and how it works in the body and how it reacts to glucose, and that is carbohydrates, we'd understand that a little bit of this sugar-free dark chocolate, for example, in the evening maybe just before you go to bed or something like that, isn't really going to have a big impact on your fat loss, because you're just going to use that fat for energy, and then you're going to keep using your own body fat for energy after that. If this chocolate had some sugar or any kind of other carbohydrate like that in it, then that would be a different story, because it would interrupt or it would disrupt our blood sugar level from being level, and it would mean that we release some insulin into our body, and obviously that starts that whole process. So that's why these stevia sweetened dark chocolates are a really, really good alternative, and they taste really good. I've tried almond ones and mint ones and orange and all kinds of different flavors, and they all taste great. So I really encourage you, if you're a chocolate fan, to check out some stevia sweetened chocolate. Now, next on this list is Zevia, and that's a brand name of a soda or a soft drink, a pop, that is being produced, and it's actually sweetened with stevia. Now, you might be lucky enough to find it in a local shop, but most people I know that buy it actually buy it from Amazon. So there are a lot of different flavors. There's a cola kind of flavor, and there's a lemon kind of flavor, and all these different flavors, and they really taste fantastic. I've enjoyed quite a few cans of this, and again, it's not something that I have every day, but it's nice to know that, once in a while when I feel like it, I can go for a drink like this, and it's something different to water or tea or coffee, but I don't need to be thinking through the whole, oh wow, it's got artificial sweeteners in it, what's that going to do to my sense of hunger, and etc., etc., because I know it's using stevia, so I'm a lot more comfortable with that. Next on the treat list is baked goods and other things like this. Now, I know this sounds a little bit strange because we've been talking about avoiding, flour and starch and all these kinds of things and focusing on beans with high fiber. But the reason that I include this on the treat list is that there are a huge range of recipes available these days thanks to the Atkins diet. And the Atkins diet is one, just briefly, that it's quite high in fat, but it's incredibly low in carbohydrates, and it's kind of in the moderate range for protein. So what that means is that most of these Atkins-friendly recipes that you might make at home are generally going to be okay with this lifestyle, just in smaller quantities, because you don't want to have a huge hit of fat, because it's a lot of energy for your body to use, and it'll use that energy before it uses your own body fat for energy. But these Atkins-friendly foods that you make at home, they're really not going to disrupt your insulin. They're not going to affect your blood sugar, for example. And so that's why I include them here. So an example is some mini muffins where you actually switch flour for almond meal. Almond meal is just ground up almonds. And we made these at home, and we made them in little mini muffin trays. So they ended up quite small, and they were just a delicious little treat to have after a meal. And we used some stevia, some cocoa, some orange essence, an almond meal, and we also threw in some flax or linseed meal. That's the same thing. And we found that they were a really, really nice alternative, and they were just something different, and we really enjoyed eating them. So I really encourage you to go out there and have a look at some of the recipes for Atkins-friendly baked goods that you could make at home, because you could make a batch of them, and they'll probably last quite a long time. But these are the kind of things that you can have in a small portion and it can really be a nice, delicious treat. It's, you know, totally different to the kind of meals that we're talking about. But more likely than not, it's not really going to impact your fat loss in a big way. It might slow it down a little bit, and that's up to you in terms of what you're comfortable with, but it's not probably going to derail it, and you're not going to gain fat by eating this stuff, which is awesome to know. Now, the other thing on this list is candy bars or energy bars, and I really do group them together here because I want to just explain that a lot of those protein bars out there are kind of disguised Mars bars, in effect. A lot of them have a lot of sugar, a lot of carbohydrates. They do have, you know, a higher level of protein, but generally speaking, they're not a food replacement. You know, they're not kind of a meal replacement. They're much more of a treat. And so there's one particular brand that I've used, and that's the ProMax LS protein bars. And the LS stands for low sugar. So they still have a little bit, and some of it's kind of fruit sugar, and some of it is another natural kind of sugar, but they're quite low in carbohydrates. They're high in protein, which is good, and they also include a lot of fiber. So I'm comfortable with these because the fiber is really slowing down that digestion. The other good news is that they're sweetened with stevia, so they're not using an artificial sweetener, and this makes them quite unique in terms that they're not using an artificial sweetener, and they also include a lot of fiber in them. So the ProMax LS protein bars are my go-to if I really feel like having a treat during the week, and for example, you know, I've been working out and so I'm quite a lot hungrier than I normally am. It's just good to bear into mind that if you're eating a whole protein bar like this, you are getting a couple of hundred calories in, and you know, if it's more than you normally eat, that could still slow down your fat loss just by a little bit, but it's not going to be in a big way. Now, last on the treat list, and I think this is just one thing to mention, is that most diabetic candies are made with some kind of combination of alcohol sugars and artificial sweeteners. And so that really doesn't make them a good thing to, for example, to be snacking on every evening or anything like every evening. I would go for ones that are only made with sugar alcohols and not made with artificial sweeteners. And even if you're having them, really, you know, once a week is probably about enough for these kind of candies, and you don't want to be eating handfuls of them either, you know, maybe just one or two. So that's the kind of treats that you can include during the week. And I think, like I said, these can be the difference between, you know, enjoying living this kind of lifestyle for the whole journey of weight loss, of fat loss that you're on, versus, you know, having a really hard time with it after, say, a couple of months. So have a look at these and, you know, have a think about maybe ordering a couple of them or checking down at a local shop and seeing what they've got available, because you might find something that you really like and that you find really satisfying. And that's what I find with the stevia chocolate, that I only need 1 or 2 pieces, and it's just about that flavor, you know, and then I'm sort of set for another week maybe, or another few days at least. And of course, always remember that your afternoon off is never more than 6 days away. So, you know, you can have a little treat during the week and then really look forward to that afternoon off where you can eat all those other kinds of foods without thinking through all of these kinds of details.